Welcome to the 4 Pillars of Men's Health, a podcast of resources for restoring vigor and vitality, bringing you top influencers in the men's health arena, case studies of men who have succeeded and how they did it, and cutting-edge teaching on men's health issues from America's leading men's health guru, Dave Skattum. Get ready to take steps towards good health. Here's your host, Dave Skattum.
Hey, welcome back to the 4 Pillars of Men's Health. Listen to this. Listen to this quote. We have weapons of mass destruction on every street corner. They're called donuts, cheeseburgers, French fries, potato chips, and junk food. That's from Dr. Joel Fuhrman. That's what he said. And he's one of my mentors. And that's so true. And the other day, I still, I struggle with this. And just the other day, I was thinking, why is it that it's such a temptation to eat chocolate, to eat sugary processed foods? And we all know, or I think we all know, that those things aren't good for you. And when you ingest that stuff into your body, it does bad things. It tears you up instead of building you up. And so why is it that we keep going back to the gas station, getting a bag of chips or a corn dog or a hot dog or French fries or whatever? And, I've come to the conclusion that it's for 2 reasons. One is, I think there is this thing called toxic hunger. And the other one, I think the other problem is emotional eating. And toxic hunger is actually a problem with a physical addiction. So like when we eat something sugary, we're actually addicted to the sugar. And so I think we do have problems with toxic hunger. And the other one is emotional eating. That's more of an emotional response to soothe negative emotion. So when you go through a hard time, you medicate with some kind of junk food. And so I think those are the 2 things that are really for me, the nut of what happens when I overeat and eat food that I shouldn't be eating. And so let's take a little bit closer look at toxic hunger. And like I said, it's an addiction to things like sugar, salt, and other types of chemicals. And when we eat this food, it actually goes in just like alcohol or heroin or any other types of drugs, and it does something good for us. It makes us feel good for a second. And years ago I had this horrible addiction to Dr. Pepper. And I know there's arguments here, but I believe that they've actually designed some of this stuff to get you addicted to it. And I remember I was in construction, and I remember going out in the morning, and at that time they had these at the gas station. I fill up my gas tank, and I also go in, and they had these things called big gulps. It was like 64 ounces of Dr. Pepper. And so I'd grab this big, it was like a half a gallon of stuff. And so I'd put that thing up to this fountain and take about 10 minutes to fill that sucker up. And I'd suck on that all morning. I'd drink that Dr. Pepper all morning. And then at lunchtime, I'd go back to the gas station because they had like this discount or refill. You could get like half price or something like that. Fill that sucker up again and drink it all afternoon. And I'm telling you, my body was just addicted to all that sugar and those chemicals, other chemicals in that Dr. Pepper that made me want to drink that every day. And I'm telling you, that was looking back over my life, kicking that habit and stopping drinking that Dr. Pepper was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I had to go through some pretty extreme measures to get rid of that addiction. And I've come to believe that when you do have an addiction, when you're hooked on sugar, salt, or other types of chemicals, there's no other alternative than to just shut that off. Quit drinking that stuff. Quit eating that stuff. Like zero tolerance. And I think there's some things that can really help you with that. And they have these organizations called Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, there's also a program for people who are addicted to food. And you can go to those. They're great support groups, and you learn a lot about the addiction, and you learn a lot about how to control that. And, the other day I was talking to a friend of mine that grew up really active, super active guy. He still is. And, pretty not underweight, but he's slim and he looks like he's in good shape. In fact, we went on a hike together and he is in good shape. But, as he was growing up, he didn't realize it. But now that he looks back, he was telling me stories about when he was growing up. And he would have birthday parties, and he's told me that none of his birthday parties ever turned out to be like positive things for him. And he never could really figure that out, why it turned into such a disaster. And it wasn't until later on in his life that he figured out that he had this addiction and this huge issue with sugar. And he's a diabetic. And he went too far with that. He got into become a little bit of an alcoholic, and maybe not a little bit, but he did become a full-blown alcoholic. He admits that, and so he had to go and address those things, and he had to cut that stuff out of his life, like zero. He could not have that in his life anymore, and he's learned how to do that. And one of the ways that he does that is he goes to Alcoholics Anonymous and the group for people addicted to food, and he gets sponsors, and he goes through this whole process of dealing with that. And you might want to check into that. And if there's certain substances, food that you're ingesting, I think it's better to call it a substance than a food, but in our society it's called food. So, and even, I read this article, and some of this stuff is hard to sort out, but I believe this is at least partially true. When they made the Oreo cookies, they did these huge studies on the perfect balance between in the taste buds of that, the sweet, the sour, the chemical taste, the crunchiness of that, the texture of the cracker, the texture of the cream, and all the chemicals and processed foods that are put into that Oreo cookie. And that cookie, I'm telling you, is made for you to be addicted to it. And so if you are addicted to those kinds of things, I think the only solution, and you just have to do it, is stop eating it. You got to zero, no, nothing, no more of that. And so that's the way that I dealt with toxic hunger, and that's the way I am dealing with toxic hunger. And so you just got to terminate it. There's no other option, and you just got to quit. So now let's take a look at emotional eating. Emotional eating is another type of unhealthy eating, and it's more about covering up an emotion. So let's say you have a bad day. Just the other day, I was thinking, man, I've been run over about 6 times today by the bus, and every which way. I'm I'm just gonna treat myself to a big. I don't remember what I had, but I went out and had something that was a Snicker Blizzard from Dairy Queen. Just jam packed with all those sugar and chemicals and all that stuff, and just woofed it down. And the truth is, when you eat emotionally, it does temporarily make you feel better. And that's the weird thing about it. It's just like with drugs. It does help you, and it does make you feel better for just a short period of time. But it's not the answer, it's not the answer. And, my mom was is a very loving, caring person. And she was just this great cook. And one of the things that she cooked was, these really delicious, fluffy, creamy, sugary, just mouth-watering cinnamon rolls. And I think, now that I look back on it, I think what I and that, I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think what I did was I started equating the love of a mom with the type of food that she gave us. And so instead of it being like a super healthy relationship where there was kind of different avenues for my mom and me to express love to each other, it became, here's some really good food. Eat this. This is going to make you feel better. Oh, you had a bad day. You didn't like this. Something happened at school. Have this. And I think it becomes an addiction, and to feel better about yourself, you need to eat something but bad for you. Now, so what are the signs of emotional eating? How can you tell what's emotional eating and what's healthy eating? And when you're eating something because you need an emotional fix, and when you're eating something just because it's good for you. Well, here's a few things that you can keep in mind regarding that. One is typically, emotional eating comes on like just suddenly. And like just out of nowhere, you get this need to eat some garbage. It usually just pours onto you. Whereas healthy hunger gradually grows in you. Emotional eating usually comes just like in a snap. Another thing is that you can tell the difference between healthy eating and emotional eating is you start craving certain specific foods, like a sugary drink or a sugary food or a salty food. And it's always like a craving for a specific food. And then another way you can tell that is emotional eating is that usually, or many times, it leads to just mindless eating. And you sit down with a bag of something and you just you're thinking about something, having a pity party or whatever, and you just pretty soon you've devoured 1,500 calories of chips, or guzzled down 64 ounces of Dr. Pepper. So it usually leads to mindless eating like that. And you're thinking about something else, but just feed in your mouth, and it just makes you feel good. Makes you feel good for a while, but then it never works out that great. Another way that you can tell if it's emotional eating is at the end of it, you never really feel satisfied. Compared to eating one of my G-bomb salad, I eat that thing, and man, I feel full, I feel good, I feel energized, and all those things when I get done eating that. But when I get done eating a bag of chips or something like that, I always man, if I could eat another bag of this, it would be really good. So you never really feel satisfied. And then another thing that happens with emotional eating is you always, or usually most of the times, you end up in a situation where you feel regret, guilt, and shame. And, I've never, at the end of eating a G-bomb salad, I've never felt regret. I've never felt shame. I've never felt guilt. But when I eat foods that I shouldn't be eating, that I know is going into my body and causing harm, and I know that I ate that anyway, it just messes with you emotionally. So those are some of the ways that you can tell the signs of emotional eating. And now treating emotional eating is a little bit different than treating a toxic hunger. With toxic hunger, like I said, you just need to stop. You need to put a hard stop on it, and you just can't keep going with it. With emotional eating, it's a little bit different because it's not your body's addicted. It's an emotional thing. And so here's 3 steps that you can use to satisfy or identify, maybe is a better way of saying it, identify emotional eating and how to resolve that and get rid of emotional eating in your life. And the first one is you need to identify the triggers that cause you to start down that road. And for me, the other day, that I was explaining the other day, when I got ran over by the bus 10 times and ended up eating a bag of chips or whatever it was, or I can't remember even what it was now. But so so I should have been able to say to myself, you know what, now I'm feeling like I got ran over, and probably the next step is going to be for me to think of some kind of food to medicate the situation. And just identifying that makes a huge difference in your life. And that's the first thing, is just recognizing that that's happening. And then the next step, after you've identified those triggers and what's causing you to emotionally eat, find a substitute. Instead of like for in my example, instead of thinking, okay, I gotta have a big bag of chips so I can feel better. Maybe what I could have done is, you know what would really make me feel better right now is if I just went on a short run. That actually, for me, that works. And I know that when I get done with my run, and during the run, I'm going to feel a lot better. And so instead of jumping into this bag of chips, I jump into my running shorts and I take off for a run. And that would have been a lot better result. And then the third thing that you can do is, when you start to feel like you're going to dive into this situation where you're eating something that's not good for you, you need to figure out a way to make a way for yourself to press a pause button and just hold off on that. Just tell yourself, I'm just going to hold off on this just for another 5 minutes. And then I'll decide if I want to eat this food or not. And that works really good for me, because a lot of times what I'm doing is I'm driving by a place that has this food, and if I just say to myself, I'm just going to wait 5 minutes, usually I've driven by it and my mind's on to something else. And so it works really good for me. So those are things that you can do to help stop this emotional eating and replace it with something else. So those are the things that you can do with your overeating. It's not many times it's not as easy as just cutting calories and burning more calories. It's not that easy. There's so many times there's more involved with it. And I think it's these two things, toxic hunger and emotional eating. And if you can get a handle around these things, then you can be much more healthier. You can lose weight. You can live longer. You can live a more healthy, active life and have a lot more energy, and do those things that you want to do with your grandkids, do those things you want to do, those big bucket list things that you need the energy for. So take these things for what they're worth to you, apply them to your life, and you'll be much better off.
You've been listening to The 4 Pillars of Men's Health with Dave Skattum. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit the4pillarsofmenshealth.com.